a very key element of how we achieve net zero by 2050. So what we'd like to do today is have Sebastian give us a short presentation. And following that presentation, we'll throw it up to questions. We'll take questions in the room. We also have some people joining us online. For those people who are joining us online, you can also write questions in using the chat function. So with that, Sebastian.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. We have a presentation that I see is distributed. It's on the screen, so you have the same. So I'll walk you in really as fast as I can through what is this airline net zero commitment meaning in practical terms for us, and then we'll be here with myself, Robert, and of course Tommy, and our team to answer your questions. So it is a historic day, and we are not. I don't think we yet realize that this achieving the net zero carbon emission by 2050 is really a big thing for us. It's a big significant target. It goes without saying that the reason why we took this proposal, we discussed it inside IATA with the board members, is to be aligned with the Paris Agreement goal. So, as you know, airlines are not part of the Paris Agreement, but we believe that there is a market consensus now. And it goes beyond what was our Kuala Lumpur engagement. So I would like to insist on that, because in Kuala Lumpur in 2009, we took a decision way ahead of the Paris Agreement to reduce our carbon emissions by half versus 2005. So in 2005, we had 650 million tons emitted of CO2. We decided that by 2050, it should be 325. Now this resolution is changing it. So we take the commitment to go to zero by 2050, which is of course based also on all the science that was discussed and presented today during the AGM. Why is it a challenge and a big challenge? And you will hear the word challenge coming quite a lot. It's because on this slide you see our forecasted evolution of air transport passenger traffic. So for us, the main target is to continue growing, because it's not the traffic that is the enemy, it's the emissions which are the enemy. So we see our industry going to 10 billion passengers per year by 2050. Now, this forecast is already including the impact of COVID. So we of course, there were forecasts of a faster growth, but if we reach 10 billion passengers per year, our assumption is that in 2050, our industry will emit 1.8 gigatons of CO2, which we need to abate. So that's the size of the challenge in 2050. Of course, it's a gradual growth of emission as well as the gradual growth of traffic. What's the plan? We can use either wise the word plan or scenario. How are we thinking we're going to get there by 2050? We believe that it is achievable through what we like calling internally the four pillars. So it was an obvious message, and it's going to continuously be a message that our biggest focus and attention will be on sustainable aviation fuel. And this is the biggest chance, and at the same time the biggest challenge. The biggest chance is because this technology is still quite fresh. It's, let's say, 10 years old, but it's a known technology. We use it, we operated more than 300 flights with the SAF blend, and it's what is called a drop-in technology. Therefore, we don't need to have different engines, we don't need different planes, we don't need different distribution infrastructure. We can use it as we speak. So, and there is a consensus, a scientific consensus, that we reduce through the life cycle of SAF, we reduce by 80% the emissions which are coming from this fuel. Now, having said that, the problem is the capacity and the supply. We have to grow our supply significantly, and I'll allude in the next slide. But basically, this is the combination of measures that you can see on the slides, which is how we believe what is the scenario that could be by 2050. So 30% from new technologies, infrastructure as operation 3, and an offsetting of carbon capture and the out of sector offsetting 90. How is it divided? So I was just mentioning this on sustainable aviation fuel. That's the big challenge we have, because what you see here is our assumption that SAF will contribute to around 65% of the emission reductions needed by 2050, but this is the size of the challenge to get SAF available. Basically to grow to what we call 450 billion liters of SAF compared to 100 million liters. So if I take multiple reports that we've done, the figure that is really maybe the clearer is that we need to multiply our supply by 10,000% versus what we have today. So I read the resolution. One of the reasons why we were so keen on having this resolution and having this as a public statement is that for everyone that wants to produce stuff, here are the customers. We will buy. This is our demand. This is what we need to get from the market to achieve our target. So that's of course just on the SAF. Now, if we take the second vision, which is on this pie chart, 13%, which is the new technologies. I would like to tell you that in this approach on very elegant solutions, electric, hybrid, hydrogen, we are very cautious because we believe that what we should do is to build our plan based on technologies that we can explain and that today can deliver what we plan. The new technologies, so the new propulsion systems, as indicated in this small table on the right, for the moment can really deliver effective reduction of CO2 for small planes, for short haul, there's a number of projects, various tests, but we don't know enough to rely on the new technologies as a means of decarbonizing. It's just a conservative approach. We much more prefer to rely on the technology that we, I don't want to say control, but we know the input and output of production, supply, and operation. If those technologies do not deliver what we need by 2050, so of course it's a plan again, and it's 3 decades from now we're talking about, we can compensate it through SAF. So that's very important that we took this assumption to be on the safe side. The next part of the plan pie is operations and infrastructure. That, I should say, is a bread and butter of our industry since many years. So it accounts only for 3%. It's small, but this is what we have been doing and will continuously doing. It's operational and infrastructure improvements because we have as airline an immediate interest since many years in reducing fuel consumption anyway, for economic reasons. Before it started to be, since a couple of years now, also a very strong environmental element. So retrofitting winglets, lightweight seating, reduced engine taxing, so-called single engine taxings, and of course calling on governments also to help us to achieve this infrastructure improvements through projects like Single European Sky, which is one of the examples which is, I have to say, frustrating for us, because if the Single European Sky was pushed and the project has been going on and on in the European Union for the last 20 years, that would mean an immediate reduction of even 6% of the CO2 emissions over Europe by just shortening the flight patterns. But again, it's only 3%. We put it because we will continue doing this as a kind of business as usual for us. And then last but not least, part of this decarbonization scenario is offsetting and carbon capture. And here, as you see on the left, the main message is that what is today the offsetting that we buy, so we buy the rights of the others, that the others reduce their emissions, and we buy the right to pollute in that place. It's actually a plan to continuously being reduced. So the CORSIA, as you know, ends in 2035, the CORSIA global agreement. We foresee no further CORSIA after 2035. We assume as IATA that offsets that we could buy will be less and less available, and we count on in-sector solutions, not out of the sector solutions, to effectively decarbonize. If I may use the word, for us, offsetting, as shown in that slide, is a gap filler in between the effective technologies of effectively reducing the CO2 and the fact of compensating our contribution. Now, carbon capture is the 10%, if you see 19 and 8% external offsets. So actually we assume that the carbon capture technologies, which are mentioned, again, it's a national technology, but are mentioned in the IPCC report, they are mentioned in various reports as a potential for growth. This is what we believe is going to be used by our technology as a form of offsetting. And we have already numerous airlines, which are members of IATA, who invested in carbon capture and storage, carbon capture sequestration. This is really a technology that we'll be looking after very closely, because that allows to address the long-haul problem, which is the biggest emitter, and carbon capture is definitely something we believe in. For the moment, we have a problem of scalability and of course of a very high cost of a ton of carbon capture that we shall pay if we want to reduce. So that leads me to the last slide. So on top of having this plan and this commitment, which again is our commitment, and I would like to point it out, it's our commitment, we need others to go along with us down the road now. So what we see here is just a glimpse of who we identified we need to go with us together. And it's not only the question of willingness, but it's a question of shifting from statements into actions. We need manufacturers to accelerate research on airframe design, electric hydrogen propulsion. You know, maybe in a few years, we will have a breakthrough in sector technology, which will allow to effectively reduce emissions. We will not have to use SAF, or will not have to offset it. We can have it if we push it. We need air navigation service providers, government, all industry, of course, increase production of SAF. We as corporate will boost SAF through purchase agreements, etc., etc. And last but not least, we'll also turn to our passengers to have a continuous support, not only to pressure us, but also to pressure this whole chain of value and pressure governments that we all want to travel. As I mentioned, travel is not the enemy is the emissions. So we need also passengers to be on our side and to say we want an industry that operates and can continuously provide us the freedom of travel, but in a clean way. So, if I may say so, that's my working plan as VP for environment, is to continuously work with those partners and push them to help us in achieving what we believe is really a historic commitment, a needed commitment, but a big challenge. I'll stop here and we'll answer all of the questions I had. Tony, moderator. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sebastian, for that really beautiful, succinct view or overlook of the plan forward. So now we'll open it up to questions. I'll remind people who are listening online that we can take questions through the chat function, but for now I see lots of hands in the room. So maybe we'll start with AFT. Sorry, thank you. And as usual, if you can identify yourself and your media outlet, that would be fantastic.
Yes, thank you. Tanguy Guiménard with Agence France Presse Data in Paris. Have you factored in, talking about passengers, the willingness of passengers to pay actually more, participating in this whole process, to pay more to fly greener, if I may say so? And are there any differences between what's going on in Europe and what's going on in Asia and in the Americas, for example? Thank you.
Do I understand correctly that it's from the passenger side?
Yes.
First of all, there's numerous more airlines. I cannot give you a specific figure, but more and more of our members are introducing the offset mechanisms when you fly. So one of our targets is to encourage passengers to use those mechanisms. I mean, literally, I think most of the airlines, when you book now, you can click and offset it. So that's action number one. Action number two, which we are developing as we speak, and it's based on offsetting. Yes, it's all based on the payment for rights to pollute. Is use the corporates. So actually, lots of corporate companies are contacting their travel agents or directly. They want to compensate for the travel of their employees. And now we are also developing a product which will allow passengers to contribute to SAF. Because one of the elements which I didn't mention here, why did we mention the challenge of SAF? There is a supply, of course, there is a supply problem, but now we have in the short term an economic problem. A ton of sustainable aviation fuel is on average 3 to 4 times more expensive than the standard fossil fuel. So of course for our industry, it's a huge effort, not to say close to impossible, to drastically increase, given that fuel in a standard basis is between 25 to 30% of the overall airline cost. So what we are trying to do is also to bring the conscience among passengers that they can click and they can also contribute to us increasing the usage of SAF to, let's say, 2% blend, and then like in the US to 10% blend. Now you ask the difference between continents. Yes, there is an obvious difference of continents that we notice between Europe, which is very vocal and very engaged. There's a lot of discussions. Now the shift that Biden administration operated in an extremely short time, from leaving the Paris Agreement, returning, and actually creating one of the best possible policies to promote SAF. Secretary Buttigieg in the video message today was mentioning what the US government has done. We are very, very enthusiastic about incentivizing producers to shift from biodiesel to sustainable fuel, because what we need is them to supply, because with the supply, the increasing supply will have the lowering of prices. And of course, there are other continents where there is an element of increasing, I don't want to say popularity, but the conscience of the environmental challenge, but also increasing the knowledge among passengers of what our airlines are doing. Today in the room, we have all continents represented. You heard some voices, but we have an overwhelming support coming from all the regions, Gulf carriers, our Asian members, Latin American members. Everyone said this is the challenge for us. It's difficult, but we all agreed as IATA globally to go into that direction.
If I may add just one thing, your initial question was on cost and whether passengers were willing to pay more. We do track those attitudes very closely, and we do see that there's a willingness or an understanding if they see the money going towards research, if they see the money going towards SAF or offsets, there's absolutely no tolerance for taxes. So you'll see us coming out with very strong messages against taxation, and that's absolutely correct, because I don't think we've seen any tax dollars actually allocated to reducing emissions in the way that the other ways of collecting funds would.
Yeah, our passengers actually believe. Sorry, it's we have a nice conversation now, but it's the point. I mean, the passengers, as we do not believe that taxation will solve the problem because there is no investment associated to taxation. What we ask is, don't give us money, give the money to the people who are doing the research. Don't tax us, but provide funding to what we need to deliver this and to have those technologies. So,
great. Dina?
Hi, my name is Dina Kamel. I'm a reporter from the national newspaper in Abu Dhabi. So I have a quick question about, the list of partners that you mentioned in the end, all the oil companies, the airports, and so on. From your discussions with them, obviously IATA has said that this initiative cannot be taken on the backs of airlines alone. It needs the partners as well. And so how much political and corporate willpower are you seeing, or will are you seeing from them to support this initiative, to support your call to action? And just the second part of that question, if I may, very quickly, a lot of Middle Eastern countries now, especially the oil-producing countries, are shifting their focus more and more to renewables. So the Middle Eastern carriers, what kind of uptake have you seen from them on this initiative, and how will they approach it?
So thanks very much. It's a very nice question, because actually I can use the presence of the acting director of Air Transport Action Group, which sits here in the first row, Haldane, because this dialogue on how we're going to share the burden among the industry has started, shall I say 30 years ago, but it started a couple of years very seriously through an association that IATA is an extremely active member. So we have basically in the most important members, in the important members from the industry, we have engine producers, OEMs, regional association, representatives of air traffic control. So basically all the list that I've shared is part of this group. Why I'm mentioning this? Because this group is going to make a statement tomorrow morning. Yeah, I think I can say that following our resolution, this group of main partners of the industry will actually voice very clearly that they support the same target. Because we know that as airline we can say whatever we want, but if our partners are not along with that, we will not achieve. And again, it's not just about investment, it's just about all the willingness and shift of spirit that it's not 2040, it's 2050, it's not 15%, it's 100%. So I believe that you know, we've been very tough in those discussions. Yeah? It's not an easy PR talk, because we know that now we're going to be kept accountable, we're going to be scrutinized, and we need to deliver it. And so there will be milestones to that. But I shall say also that it's easy to go to all the interviews of the CEOs of big airline producers. They all saying that this is the challenge as well for them. It's not only a challenge for us, but it's also a challenge for them. Concerning the Middle Eastern carriers, actually I see them since many years in the leading front of decarbonization efforts, not only through decarbonization, but basically through sustainability. So I don't see a contradiction between Middle Eastern countries being one of the biggest oil producers and then committing to that. Emirates, Qatar, and you know, everyone is part of it, and understand that this is not where you come from. This is what is the need of the planet, what the passengers want, and that's an existential element for us. We cannot just escape this topic wherever we come from. So I see a big support coming from that.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions online, so we'll take one from there. It comes from the Financial Times. And the question essentially says, do we have interim emissions goals between now and 2050, and will they be reported on, or how will they be reported on?
So we have we do not publicly share yet the interim goals, but definitely the next step for us is now to create an IATA approved plan of interim steps. I can only share that at the last special board dedicated to environment, it was agreed that this resolution will be strongly supported by the board, but the next step we will work on now is intermediary steps. So which technologies by when we want to deliver. So there will be definitely public communication about it, probably as the next important steps of our delivery of this time.
Indeed. And in the meantime, if you look at our release, there's a section in the release which gives an idea on a 5-year period, for every 5 years, where we would expect to be. So that'll give you a good indication of how we intend to get to 2050. Back to questions in the room. Kathy?
Yeah. Do I need to?
Yes, that's coming to you.
Thank you. At the last in-person AGM, to go back to the question of my colleague from AFP, do you have a clue how many passengers do offset? Because I remember the frustration from Castro Sport that saying, we offer it, but less than 1% of our passengers are buying it. Do you have any idea how much it is now?
I think it's less than 10%.
Less than
10%. But you know, probably some of the frustration when we voiced quite often that some of it's the process for passengers to do it, not necessarily connected to the willingness. I think hopefully this opportunity allows a more coordinated approach for passengers being involved in decarbonisation. So not just offsets. Perhaps an interesting example that I've noted over the past 18 months is In fact, it's Lufthansa that offered the option for their passengers to either select an offset or put that money towards sustainable aviation fuel. And what's interesting is the SAF on a per tonne of CO2 is more expensive, but nearly 75% of the passenger money is being directed to SAF. I think showing that these are probably the engaged passengers, particularly engaged passengers environment, but recognising that the in-sector reduction is, it's their preference.
But when you say the 10%, sorry, less than 10%, which could be 5%.
5 less than 10, it could be, yeah.
It could be, okay, good. So, and that includes buying SAF, offsets for SAF. That includes everything, the whole pot. Okay, and then I'm sorry, a second question. So the 65% comes from, in your plan, from sustainable aviation fuel. We have said, I'm sorry, you guys have said that you're very careful with new technologies, hydrogen and so on. What if it doesn't materialize? How much SAF would you need?
What if the technology does not materialize?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's possible. Then the difference between the percentages is 13% coming from the technology. So if those technology doesn't deliver, the best way we have to compensate is through SAF. And by the way, in all the plans we've done and studies we've done on availability of SAF, because it's sustainable, so it needs to be sustainable in the way it's produced. We assume that this technology will not be existing. So we take it as it's a plan, it's a scenario. So we are very cautious in putting those new technologies in a plan.
Yeah, I think the risk is more that we will see more of the new technologies in the plan. So we've been very conservative in the way we've been evaluating that.
Yeah, exactly. But the 400 so much billion SAF that you need, that is 65%.
That's not, yes, that's correct, and that's not a technical limit on what can be
No,
produced.
it could be.
Yes, yes,
so
It could
yes.
be, my mathematical skills are not very good.
Yeah.
No,
Okay, so 30% on produce, you would need 6 months?
No, plus 13%, so
Why is that my
450 plus 13 is like 500.
But anyway, we don't, I think the answer is that we don't get new technology, there'll be more
You
time.
got all
Yeah.
this stuff, okay. Whatever method of production there is, which
Well,
only explains.
there's two key areas. Is there available feedstock to meet the needs of aviation, let's say in the year 2050?
Okay.
And, under the right sustainability constraints. So we've done, IATA and third parties, including ICAO, have done some very detailed analysis on this, because that's the first step you need to understand. Is the problem solvable? And it was even back in 2015 we first addressed that as, yes, there is adequate feedstock out to the year 2050. Those independent sort of work. So that gives us an assurance. We have the technology today. There's 7 approved pathways to produce that. That's a good thing. There's more coming down. Really, we look at this in terms of sort of marginal abatement costs, because as you get to the more complex SAF production routes, they do, certainly with the information we have today, become more expensive. So we think that technologies like hydrogen and electric, which really are, as Sebastian said, elegant solutions for short-haul travel, they should, own that part of the solution. So they're still yet to be fully commercially developed. So that's why we have a question mark, because we don't fully know if that will play out. But we have the backstop there.
We just wouldn't leave you with the impression that we do not believe in those projects. But if you take the timelines of hydrogen statements done by Airbus, for example, the next important step is 2025, when they're going to say us when this technology is going to be available, more or less at what range, how many passengers, what infrastructure for distribution of hydrogen is needed, how is it going to be the green hydrogen that needs to be produced. So we are cautious, because if we put more emphasis on that, the next question will be, okay, what do you know more that they don't know? So we prefer to take this option, but again, be super conservative. But it's just a scenario. At the General Assembly in 2026, maybe we will have a completely different figures, because we'll know more about the in-sector non-liquid fuel requiring technologies. Yeah, so we have to approach it in the credible but creative way.
We have a question online which sort of takes this discussion one step further, and is asking about SAF production and how that would evolve. Do we anticipate that will be centralized or decentralized?
We assume it's going to be decentralized, but I'd rather turn it over
Yeah, the assumption is that it will be decentralized. One of the nice things about SAF is, depending on the feedstock and technology combination that you're using, there are different parts of the world that are more, perhaps more advantaged than other parts for a particular part. Like if we're talking about, growing a rotation crop, or about using renewable electricity, perhaps for power to liquid, the sort of obvious parts of the world you can think of that have their attraction. What we do want to see, though, is that if particular regions do have a greater natural advantage to oversupply the market, that can be done, and that requires a book and claim accounting system, which allows sort of really airlines then to access all of planet Earth's SAF demand, and it gives the opportunity for countries that perhaps can supply more to do so, and take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you. We have just about 10, maybe we can push it to 15 minutes left. So we'll try and, if you can keep your questions short, we'll try and keep our answers equally short and get through as much as we can. So maybe Seth?
Yeah, hi, Seth Miller from PackSets.Aero. This is not the first time IATA has established a very bold claim of what you expect to deliver in terms of SAF production. And the last time it didn't work real well in your favor. You've come up well short of what was proposed in 2009. What about this time makes IATA more confident that you're actually going to get there?
In 2009,
Yeah.
did we?
So to be clear, in 2009, we committed to 3 things. One was to improve fuel efficiency by 1.5% per year to 2020. We did better than that. We committed to stabilizing emissions from 2020. In fact, with Conferencia, we stabilized emissions at 2019 levels. And we are on the way to the long-term goal of halving emissions to 2005 levels by 2050. And the goal that we're taking today is part of that step. Now, with specific how SAF worked out within that, maybe Sebastian or...
Yeah, I mean, because I don't know, that was not, SAF was not part of our commitment that time. Yes, that was not mentioned in the Kuala Lumpur resolution. Those 3 elements that Tony just quoted were, and actually the change that we operated today is about the reduction of CO2 emissions. And also the resolution, of course, is saying that we'll rely on sustainable aviation fuels, but it's very much about our commitment to add this remaining 12% of emissions. So basically our commitment versus the graphic 2050 was that we're going to reduce by 88%. Now this resolution is adding this more difficult, the most difficult part, which is just 12%. So we want to be carbon neutral by 2050 latest.
And if you ask what's different between now and then, you heard Secretary Buttigieg this morning talking about the incentive that the U.S. is putting in there to establish a viable commercialized SAF industry. I think that's the type of action that was missing post-2009 that we're starting to see governments coming on board.
Are there other governments, so the U.S. is talking about it, it's not through Congress yet, but are there other governments specifically that you see following along and committing similarly?
There's tremendous policy work going on now. I mean, if you think back to, you referenced 2009, I don't know if there's a specific, perhaps quantitative reference behind that question, but I mean, there were no pathways certified to technically produce SAF. We were still testing, was it even safe or possible? So the information change between now and 2021 is dramatic in that sense. We had 0 policies that supported SAF in any way. There were plenty of ground transport policies, and that was actually a disadvantage for SAF because all of the attention was just on the ground transport sector. Now there's 36 countries that have a dedicated SAF policy, and there's a huge number right now that are either developing initiatives or developing sort of regional consortiums to talk about these policies. And the useful thing is there's a lot of examples to sort of reference for countries that are perhaps at an earlier stage in their policy development. New Zealand's a good example. They're looking very closely at what's happening with the Jet Zero Council in the UK, and there's a great information sharing going on. So, I mean, I think that the natural trend is we'll see probably almost every country develop some type of SAF policy, over the next 5 years, and hopefully also an international agreement through IATAAGM.
We would like very much to have SAF discussed at ICAO level. We are always fundamentally against a patchwork of solutions. We would like that SAF is part of a mandate that is managed under ICAO agreement, so we have a playing level field and equal access to SAF fuels by everyone. Because of course, as Robert is mentioning, these policies are all mandatory mandates, or taxation, or incentives. Every country has a different approach. It would be fantastic to, as for Conferencia, to have some approach to a global agreement.
Thank you.
Big question in that. Yes.
My name is Michal. I'm from Israel, the financial newspaper blog. And my question regarding the pricing.
Eugene, can you take your mouse?
Yeah, my question is regarding the pricing, but not from the point of view of the willingness to pay more, but in the policy of airlines that will have to invest a lot in order to be sustainable and greener. So can you estimate what will be the influence of the pricing?
I mean, my answer to this, there's two elements of the answer. First, environment and sustainability is going to be part of the same business running cost as safety. And that's actually quite a significant change since the Kuala Lumpur resolution that we mentioned. So, if I may allow myself the center, it's going to cost what it's going to cost. We have to go there. Of course, as a rational airlines and rational economic agents, we will look for the cheapest solution and the most available solutions. So the expression, this resolution today is also something which we would like to say to all our industry partners. We are very serious about it. There will be demand, so please invest and provide us the best and cheapest possible technologies. Alluding to SAF, why we insist on SAF? Because we believe that there will be a moment where SAF should be cheaper than fossil fuel. Of course, today it's 4 times more expensive, but with the assurance that demand is there, with the growth of the supply and the development of more than 7 technologies that Robert mentioned, it can be 10, and the fact that there is no upstream, because you can go from various feedstocks available throughout the world, we will reach a point when it's going to be less costly and naturally hedged. Yeah, you will have less variation of the price than you have today, which is linked to the fossil fuel upstream cost. This is also one of the points we discussed, is that we as industry need to provide a very strong signal that investments are welcome because customers are on that side of the table and will buy it.
And then I think we have time for one last question. We have one last question.
Hi, it's Justin Bachman from Bloomberg News. Has there been, all the discussion is focused on SAF and the industry's needs. Is there any broader discussion with other large purchasers of fossil fuels today where the entire industry, cargo shipping, trucking, rail, where these industries are also looking for a different solution and new technology, so that you have a broader purchasing base and not just aviation for this type of fuel of other industries that want to migrate in the same way?
So the answer is no. I'm speaking under the technical control of Robert because our fuels are different. We know that shipping technology is having the ammonium solutions, that there are, our SAF fuel has to be considered through the material agency exactly as the fossil fuel. So we have different technical needs to be allowed to put the fuel in plane, of course, for safety reasons. So as industry, we're very proud that there is Conferencia, that there is a global approach to offsetting and to decarbonization. I believe that there is a global approach to SAF. Yeah? We all use the same fuel. That's the challenge also. But we do not have any discussions with trucking or maritime. It's just because not that it's not welcome, but we have different needs.
Maybe just add on to that too. I mean, already there's today with ground fuel mandates, there's significant demand for the heifer produced ground fuels. Now, what we're seeing with almost all of the refineries that can produce heifer is they're configuring their refinery to maximise their output for the ground transport sector. So what we want to see, obviously, is that more and more of that can be sort of retrofitted or reconfigured to get higher output of SAF. So that's a good thing, but also will expand the entire market. As we move towards the two next technologies that will come along will be Fischer-Tropsch gasification. Already some facilities are starting to be finished and continue to come online. They can produce higher portions of SAF out of the synthetic crude that gets made. Same with alcohol jet or isobutane multi-jet. You can get up to sort of 70–80% of the end product slate being SAF. So that's really what we're going to see in terms of the direction there. And I think on shipping, to be fair, we do collaborate with the shipping industry in terms of recognising we're a similar portion of global emissions, and we talk about our strategy. In a sense, I think they're borrowing a little bit from us in the direction that we're taking in some of the initiatives.
Great, and I think that brings us pretty much exactly to 2 o'clock when the session was scheduled to end. We have the afternoon, which is going to focus on environment and sustainability in the main room. So I'd encourage you all to join the plenary session. And we also have at the break time another press briefing here focused on reopening issues. So I encourage you to join that. And I see Chris waving at me. Is there something I'm forgetting to say?
Just a quick one in terms of keep an eye on IATA.org/fly-net-zero, where we will put information such as I've given out today. Remember to pick up a hard copy of the slides. There's a few left here on the table next to me. But please keep an eye out on IATA.org/fly-net-zero, where you will see more information coming out over the coming days. Thank you.
Great, thank you everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you to those online.